Okay, one more time. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Authors Hour. Also, welcome to summer. We've had some in around. My name is Fred Storm. I represent the Friends of the Chicago Writers Center. We are a volunteer organization whose mission is to promote writing and writers on the institution grounds and beyond by both supporting and supplementing the activities of the Chicago Writers Center. We sponsor several events every on Sundays at 5 o'clock up in the closed room, which is on the second floor. Writers and listeners over are invited to participate in the open mic session. Each speaker gets between 3 and 5 minutes. On Wednesday at 1:15 in the ballroom, which is also on the second floor, we offer an informal critique session. One single space for feedback by the all on Thursday from 12 to 1, we launch a new series of local libraries. Each week, free to talk authors their work. This was and today, as part of the Tuesday office reading series, talking about it. It used to be at that time, I had 2 weeks. Some parts of it, I'll make some announcements. One of my books will be the group or individually. First, we have a master's degree in communication from the University of Illinois, and former vice chairman of Omnicom and CEO of Omnicom API. And we have moved on to right now. PBS and was also a founding member and the first chairman of the 4A multicultural advertising internship program. Former board member of the student center, and a founding member of the systematic process focused on student and health business cooperation. His president on the board of directors and council for responsible social media and Washington, D.C. He is creator of many roles to content in both studies and media and Alabama. Computers and art and many days when I thought my life. This is
Thank you. I'm going to sit for a little bit because I have a pleasure to be with you and to talk about pleasure to bring my son here. Last time I was here, we had more than 15 minutes. When I was here 2 years ago, I talked about this book called Discovering Truth, how to navigate between fact and fiction in an overwhelming social media world. And it was considered to be quite relevant at the time, still is relevant. People are more familiar with the internet and how to use it. I evolved that book after a podcast series in titled 10 Loves Discovering Truth. I said Jane Goodall, but also Chairman, former Chairman, CEO, Procter & Gamble, Disney, Unilever, some other communication experts. I helped from that, I developed this book released in November, and it's called The Medium is the Mirror, and it's the reformation of truth. It's reshaping our relationships, our politics, and our civic beliefs. The introduction is written by Dick Gephardt, former leader of Congress, and I asked Dick to do the introduction because he was in charge of the Congress when we had the Communication Act of 1996, which is the communication policy that we're still operating with. And my book will discuss how antiquated it is, because when it was created, it says to this day when we talk, there's a radio interview that we just did with PBS. And I have a huge picture if you want to listen to the radio interview, 22 minutes. But he always says that was his biggest mistake in government. And I always correct him and tell him it wasn't a mistake. It was the right thing to do at the time. The mistake was that nobody looked at it since then. Because when that law was created, internet penetration in the United States was only 15%, 1995-96. Think back to when you first started using it. Probably got a modem and a telephone line hooked in. You probably still remember the sound. But we've gone back and re-examined that policy. And there's some assumptions that were made when we started out on the internet that are just dangerous now. First assumption was that the internet providers would be empty pipes distributing information in our email. That's the case anymore. They also did not use advertising. And that makes sense. Remember, it was just type, there was no motion, there was no sound. And our government said, okay, so what's your business model? And it's subscription, by telephone, a monthly bill. Well, that is how it's developed into the most powerful advertising planet. The largest advertisers now use the internet to advertise. And commercial content is supported by advertising. So we've had 7 different policies on the communication policy. The internet technology is controlling information. We've never had our information controlled in America. not when Hearst bought all the newspapers, not when ABC, CBS, and NBC, radio, television. Our information is so controlled. And as my book will tell you, we've left our internet wide open to foreign and domestic thefts. Wide open. People aren't getting information about this right now because they're making so much money on the advertising. And I'm a little disappointed in my industry, which has always been an advocate of fake media. Very quiet right now. It's because they're making money on it. So I've spoken out on this. That's what this book is about. And there's a larger context for this, and that is that appreciating the truth, trust in our belief about election integrity, and our capacity for democratic self-government. Self-government requires that citizens have self-governance. And our thought patterns, in our opinion, are very much controlled by the internet. It has no standards for it. In fact, as they've developed algorithms which are code to be able to read what your interests are, to curate the interest content that comes to you. And about a month ago, there was a lawsuit that was settled in California where a woman who had been harmed by some content that she was seeing over the internet won the case. Now the internet companies are pesticides that are trying to settle with 100,000 different cases that are on the books. So I ask you to consider reading this book, and more importantly, that you think a little more critically about the information. There's a dynamic that's happening that I call neurodystopian conditioning. Neurodystopian conditioning. When we write things down, they become more concrete in our memory. On your resume, what you're expecting, write down your mission, write down what your strategy. But when we write things down, we use parts of our brain that we don't use when we're talking. Communication is called temperance. And there's feedback we're getting while we're talking. But when we write things down or type in text, we go into our brain and use parts of our brain and they calcify. What we look for then is information firms them, rather than be willing to let information come in that may tell us that we were wrong. And neurodystopian conditioning, like fitness, takes time. You don't see it in one workout over time. We are being conditioned by this, and you're going to read more about these law cases. But we've done things about this in the past. Communication policy, we can do it again. Just need the general public to become more aware and to make this known to our government. I guess one other example that I'm a little worried about is that a lot of people say, well, what can I do? Well, you can vote. And you can also let your government representative know about it. But I have to admit, it's hard to expect our government to do anything when the president has his own fully pulpit called social and any oversight. He has no obligation to Congress. This is a change. So enough for this now. I'll be happy to answer a couple of questions. He's asking if when I say that the internet is controlled, that model. Well, I don't know if you've heard about that. There are 7 corporations It's technology company. And some people call it big tech, call it technology. That technology has more control over the internet, entertainment, television, more control than by those same companies. Read about Paramount buying this, consolidation of information is dangerous for a country that needs to be able to have self-government, self-continuing. So, the time to wake up. I hope my boss will do that. I don't think I heard I say this last week. It won an award in international book competition for business and marketing and advertising. Some people said, well, why isn't it about culture and politics? And I said, well, I'm not a politician. I'm an advertising guy. And I know a lot about information and how information persuades people. But that's what I did for people. Yes. He's saying as these companies compete with one another, do I find that they work together? It's the biggest lobby in Washington, bigger than the gun lobby. And October 5, 2024, a law was passed in the Senate called the Kids Online Safety Act. Passed by 91 to 3. The last time we had anything in our government past 91. Well, it then went to the House. What did the House do? They came back and they've never put it up on the floor of the House. The parents who have lost children are beside themselves. We haven't spoken up. We've allowed this to happen. So it also coincided with around July 24, when the shift toward political much to President Trump. Bezos, Musk, you can see him on the inaugural list. If you vote for Musk to run an organization called Quillyshine, those were $2 billion because they control information. And we need to get our hands around our information again in this country.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, or five, nonetheless, part of it was on children and healthcare.
Yeah, and we did really good job on those factors with tobacco. Very similar.
Well,
Oh, for years, smoking is good for you. South America. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. The book is also available in thank you so much. On July 12th, December 20th, annual book from 20 authors
Thursday, August 20th, for the annual public safety and home project.
And bars and
So I'm presenting about the book, The Hidden Way by Harrison Love. This book, which is illustrated by me and written by me, took me about 13 years to produce. I would read from the book, but I encourage you to read it yourself. I can read quotes from it, but I think that um, in the time might best be served to address some of the questions that I most commonly get. I lived down in the Amazon for 2.5 years approximately. In 3 years in the book, because I left all of my equipment, cameras, and everything at the Explorers Club in Lima, and had to go back after being called back to for health. The book is comprised of interviews that I conducted firsthand with Cambodian, Bolivian, and Peruvian shaman, Mission people in Guanami, and Los Ethnic peoples in Ecuador. I taught myself Spanish in order to conduct some of the interviews. However, many people ask me how I communicate with people whose primary language is Quechua. Luckily, as an illustrator, I'm equal of depicting picture and illustrate my questions. And quite often, I would ask for questions or ask not complicated questions, and that was relatively useful. Actually, across cultures, even when we live in Japan. The illustrations in the book are all woodblock prints, and they're actually some of the originals are available on a table back this box here. The copies of the book, if you wanted to go and check them out. The book itself is in a hidden way was designed in an effort to try to preserve a sense of the cultural history and myths of Amazonian tribal people. Well, writing, but pass along oral history. 2008, I became inspired to try to research indigenous culture, specifically what role does art play what is removed from the state of Congress. Why do all societies and communities have some kind of art and what role do we play? That was actually something that I found early on in the process of research. Tension with the individual as well as the tribe, coming from other tribes, the neighborhood tribes, and then use the objects, an object or textile, of which there is a textile that was made by indigenous women in the Amazon by Shibiro, which acts as a kind of child narrative age. Um, Warsaw energy also contains the energy, kind of like a email. You can put that on to context, clothing, the object kind of view of spiritual. Um, the experience was profound and definitely had an effect on my life. I was an artist before this and an artist afterwards. That's how I am. I had some success in my career and was blessed by the use of modern art and so for my painting, it's not related to my book. Almost never told anybody about my book making because it wasn't finished. It was taking quite a long time. At the 10-year mark, most people ask you, how did you do it? And then the 13-year mark is not that. So once it was finished, I was really proud of people out. Novel, a lot of short-lived, novel. In oldness, so for the book, Planet Man, reason it would do the work of the book. Never anything may be aware Amazon are with the lungs of the earth, but you may not know that 80% of all pharmaceuticals are derived from Amazon. And think of it as the world's pharmacy as well. And one of the things that compelled me to go down there in the first place was that there was a new era of concession for oil and deforestation that was happening. They were going to build a town and a road where they never really had one before. And all of the oral histories and traditions of the tribes were going to be adulterated by outside the world. And in some way, it was going to be modified, and it was going to be produced. I felt that it was important that our culture, the outside world, send some ambassador that was involved in the partnership and also some into the and anthropologists probably look at it as sort of a butterfly reason for learn as humbly as I could from the people. And there's actually a photograph on the inside page of the novel of someone who I was Juan Flores as my master. He invited me very politely after the time of living with him for 3 months to marry one of his daughters and live there happily forever the rest of my life. And he said, "You can do this. You can. I invite you to go and do this." And I can see that for you. But if you don't pursue that for yourself, then I think that you should probably have a retreat. Something that's coming at you that prevents you from leaving. Someone like that. Really, so complexity is very complex. Happening are outside, especially financial nature. So I think as many of us look around at Chautauqua. Then I realized that if I did so, I would be sacrificing the privilege that every iteration of my genus had brought to me. It's not only my tribe, not only my family, not only my neighbor's tribe, but many tribes. And if I did that, my own happiness, my art, my writing, would only exist there and not out here, and not speaking to you today. I'm very happy that I think that I made the right choice. And after about a couple of weeks, I learned that the fire had broken out in the area and 13 people were killed. And I knew that that was what we foresaw. That if I had, I probably would have become an attachment of the guerrillas or something to try to fight for the indigenous land rights, which I have done in my own way, but in a smaller, more direct way. Um, since then, in the time that has passed, the tribes have been under threat, have uh, oil equipment, drilling, and actually just kind of a cultural malaise about the understanding of the value of property on land. It is more valuable to have cattle on it and to have nothing else besides cattle or soybeans than it is to try to preserve the cultural enrichment of those areas and those territories. And until Peru or Brazil or other countries like Colombia that have a dense rainforest understand that that might be something that our tourism and the rest of the world might find valuable, like the lungs of the world and for some ways, the International Council has decided to protect land by making them in some capacity tribes protected under international law. And in 2008, they discovered one impacted tribes by doing aerial flyovers and such. And they decided that what they live right on top of mineral resources and oil. So what they would do is they would set up an oil derrick and they would yell at a tribe by options. And or take heat resignated shots via drones that flew over and monitored their mining forecast, which is often preposterous. This is heroin oil, which is on a and luckily none of these things went underway. Peru decided that the weren't theirs, and Brazil insisted belong to them. They're nomadic. They're not ours because under international law, you're not allowed to build or contact them because they don't have any immunity to conflict. And like some terms of steel, the terms might wipe out more than 50% of the population. Fortunately, and realize we need to not only for ourselves and the future of our country, but also for the benefit of the outside world. And I know that we're going to be short on time a little bit, so I'll leave with one story that I had from an interaction with Juan Flores when I first met him. God bless his soul, he died last year. But his money, Yaku, and everything else is still intact in his legacy. I was interviewing the different tribe members, and I had an iPhone second generation in my breast pocket. And it was covered in a wood case. It was actually a cork case that looked like a block of wood. And he was pretty crude, and he could deduce that there was some reason that I was turning my breast pocket towards people. And, leaning in. And he said, what is that? I don't know. I don't know what word I said, is it a computer? And I said, you know what a computer is? He said, yes, I saw one in a magazine 20 years ago. And he asked me, what does it do? Like, serves a singular purpose. Does it play chess? Does it tell you questions? You don't have linear senses of time there. So I took it out of my pocket. I said, "Here, device can answer any question you have in a matter of moments." And he said, oh, huh, why don't you ask it where we are right now? We're in the middle of the Amazon between the border of Peru and Brazil. So he asked what he thought was an interesting question. And unfortunately, for me, Wi-Fi connecting to the outside world. Uh, oh, so zoomed into the area of the Amazon that I knew we were at, a screen, no road. And I showed it to him, and the light was really it glowed. And then I started to zoom out, just very, very slowly. And my fingers to technology was really different. I hadn't seen that before. And he just started. And he said, okay, that's enough. That's generally where I'm going. He said, so how is the outside? Well, how is the outside world doing it? I said, it's actually becoming more sick because of this. And he said, I could see that. I could see that probably taking over because I know where I am. I know where I need to go. But if this tells you everything, then why do I need to know any of that? And we just kind of left on that moment. And he had recognized that there was this issue with the outside world. And as a shaman, you were looking to try to heal other people. In any case, I encourage you to look into my illustrated novels or copies of them, but also just uniquely being only on the illustration for that. My name is Harrison Love. I also encourage you to check out Ken Love's book, My Father. He's quite accomplished, and I am nothing if not his passionate.
I like to give people curious to actually open the book and look at it. A few reminders about other literary events, not necessarily things. Tomorrow at 12:15 on this board, the what they call Summer Homeless Text Program will honor two Chicago writers. Involved with from big session, I imagine. On Friday, I felt that the spotlight leaders from the pros and cons if I had a better memory, I would tell you what the cost is. Remember back there? If you look at poetry.csc.org, put together the storm. He holds an English education. And that is the Boston Conference. And several universities incorporated. Celebrating success of the husband, family, and friends. Those are travel, being curious and exploring, discovering, connecting with people. We can, you know, we will be giving. Because everyone wanted to follow. Okay. It's to do that. Okay. My blood, Quillyshine. I like my dad, if we could go outside, if we promise, or just let him eat the grass. What well, oh, one time that I was with my friend Amy came over, and Carol, Lisa, other neighborhood kids came to see porcupine. My God, soon, makes me friends. But he wasn't done that. He walked over to a flower garden. The shocking was watering flowers. And shouted, there's a porcupine in your yard. You know, a twig. I turned on the light. I'm glad you did. The last one, porcupine. This is eating the lilac and who the artist was. That's the porcupine led us to the peach Tony's house. Just like that, he cleaned up everything. All the twigs under Lisa's chest. Then he went to Carol's house and he fell asleep. Now Carol's mom brought us popsicles to eat while we waited for him to wake up. Soon the porcupine woke up and he took the shortcut to Amy's favorite pine tree that she used to love to climb. And so this time the porcupine turned and waved. He was one of us now. We watched him climb all the way to the top. We tried to pick a name for him. We tried names like George, Matt, Buster, but nothing sounded right. Well, Amy had a big brother who went to college, and he was studying technology engineering and for spring break. He was not all curious until he saw us looking at the top of the pine tree. I saw the promotion. Look, he shouted. Porcupine is my favorite tree, Amy said. Amy's brother wasn't happy about it. Did not listen to the time. Did not want to room. We kept our distance like the next. Amy's brother was scared for some reason. through it, and luckily, the porcupine didn't like that, now he's scared too, so he shook his tail and rounded his back and he was going to I want you to buy my book. That's our cliffhanger. So a little bit about how this book came about. Based on a real happening probably and my oldest today, she was part of it, but there was really important time within our residential neighborhood. She would like finding one here. Of course, all the kids had to follow it, and we followed it, and he could have been eating the things that I said he did. I kind of looked at it to see what porcupine would actually eat in a residential neighborhood. So those were true, but for my story part that I know that I was. Well, what did happen though was he did climb the tree. That part was real, but different type of tree. And I don't want to again get too much about what happened. Does have a good happy ending. And all of course to what happened after the project. I do have to tell you though, when I wrote this, that was in our text, you know how we always have those stories, what brought our things together. And most of you are Jews. I do want to tell my backyard. I had 5 friends, and one wasn't home, and my friend was where we time. So with that, you know, that was always running my mind. Well, the late boomer I went to college and so when I had to write the start my English class, this one came to mind, and that's when it started back in 2000. Part of that, to do something instead of Cicero's stories, and like how Cicero, what did he do to move beyond them? And that's my favorite thing. To me, the definition. And when I looked up what porcupine, the reason why I picked that definition was when I looked up what porcupine was in the dictionary, said it was a rodent. And it was funny, and I thought, as a little kid, I did not see that as a rodent. You know, it was a cute little animal. It went up. So, here's the plan, and that's the hint to the title of Quillyshine. Didn't want to call it a rodent anyway. So that's it. And then 2 years later, another professor of education, she wanted to have fun. I already have one ready. No. So I did that book. The oldest daughter is artwork. Really cool. So that's for like, she has, I live in California. She's 4 now. I got into about 2 years ago. She took me to dedicated to you. She's, I am just waiting. She's a graphic designer. So then my younger daughter, who's actually a better artist, because my younger daughter, I always take the older daughter, growing up, she said, oh no, that's not how to do this or that, or house or anything. Now you got ready her artwork to her. So my daughter, my youngest daughter, yeah, so I don't want to get too much of it. I would like to tell you the story. When I put it together was that I had worked at the top of the page. 2 or 3 words how she was got a picture and what was over it. And so her another year. She did a another wonderful thing. Probably remember too the first time you've ever seen Ray or something right outside our window. There's a picture window with my neighbor's daughter, and she's like so springtime and she said birds. I wonder if she had time to do it too, because she was just she talked with her before she was the things I think if nothing else, it's like going on an adventure or finding that one thing that connects you and brings you back. Right? All right. So, any questions from anybody? Good. All right, I'm done. I'm gonna get out of the early meeting. Thank you for sharing. Right. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, what is your question for me? Feel all or like we're going to grab stuff. So,
You trained me for his book or you me for mine.
Any other questions for you? Really, Mark will talk about the things that are questions too. Here's the work after, so you wrote the work and then ask for illustration. Here, notice that the words or sound back and forth, but
Well, thank you. Whenever it came to me with as much patience and grace as I could give myself.
or this art is about the food company and the first student Thursday called the students and the first we play a workshop for the boys and the Saturday opens on Thursday for their Please join us next week for the office hour as Sandy Burns is normally a poet in fact when we do our fiction. Conference memorized all the authors on this one are the Lord YouTube. And